Hello everyone. On today's edition of Writing Notes, I'm going to talk to you about the rhetorical methods of development. So, there are 9 rhetorical methods of development. And I'm going to go through each one of them and talk to you a bit about what's involved in them, comparisons and contrasts between them, and interconnections, things like this. But before we do that, we need to sort of step back and ask the fundamental question: what are rhetorical methods of development? Well, rhetorical methods of development do exactly what they say on the tin, which is they are ways in which we organize rhetorical material in order to effectively persuade an audience. And these are different structures for putting together material, putting together arguments to achieve different persuasive ends. So, rhetoric, as we probably all know by this point, is the use of rhetorical tools and techniques in order to persuade an audience to believe or accept something that we want them to believe or accept. And one of the 3 basic rhetorical appeals is what we call logos, which usually gets translated as evidence, but the bigger part of logos is actually the organization of arguments, or the structures of argumentation. And this is where the rhetorical methods of development come in, because they are 9 different methods for organizing information within an argument. Organizing premises and conclusions, organizing connections between data, organizing the various components of a claim structure. So, here we go. Number 1 that I'm going to talk about today is narration. So, narration is basically storytelling. It's a technique where you use the components of storytelling, things like plot, character, setting, tension, detail, things like this, in order to illustrate for your reader or your listener a particular point, a particular scene that in some way provides evidence to support your central argument. So it's illustrative in this sense. This is pretty interconnected with our second rhetorical method of development, which is description. So in description, you're providing details about a particular thing. So this may be details about a scene, this may be details about a law, this may be details about a historical event, details about a problem, details about whatever it is. So you're giving us information to help us sort of understand what a thing is. And then that sort of takes us into our third rhetorical method of development, which is definition. And definition is about identifying what exactly a thing is, particularly what it is in terms of its characteristics, and then using those characteristics to determine sort of the essence of the thing, or the category that the thing belongs in. So, with definition, we might say, what are the core elements of a constitutional law in the U.S.? And then once we say, all right, these are the criteria that a particular statute needs to meet in order to be constitutional, we can define constitutional and unconstitutional laws. And to the extent that we define something as constitutional, for instance, we're then identifying a characteristic of the thing we're identifying the characteristics of the thing that then puts it into a category. And here's where we sort of blend into our fourth rhetorical method of development, which is classification and division. Because with definition, we're categorizing a thing based on its own properties, based on how its properties connected, or how its properties located within that category. With classification and division, we're doing comparative work. So we're categorizing things based on comparison with other categories. So we could say this is a constitutional law. We're classifying it as such because it's not an unconstitutional law. So we're dividing those two things. Classifying this law as constitutional, other laws as unconstitutional. So we have that division aspect. We can classify this as a constitutional law because it's not an orange or an igneous rock or Justin Bieber, for instance. So this is about establishing which category something belongs in compared to other categories. So definition, again, is about establishing which category a thing belongs to based on its own qualifications, its own positive attributes. Classification and division asks us to compare with other potential categories a thing could be in. Speaking of comparison, our fifth rhetorical method of development is comparison and contrast. And this is looking at two or more things in terms of how they are similar and how they differ. And we figure out what attributes do these two or more things share, what attributes don't they share. I mean, classification and division, I think, is one that's fairly straightforward and that a lot of people are going to be familiar with. And this is one of the techniques that we use, for instance, to make classification and division arguments as well. So again, these are often interconnected. But classification and division is about categorization, whereas comparison and contrast is not as concerned with categorization. That may be part of what we end up doing in comparison and contrast. But in comparison and contrast, we're really looking at two or more individual things to identify similarities and differences. So it's not as much about saying, this is the type of thing that we have here. So slightly switching gears now, we're going to our next rhetorical method of development. This is 6. So our sixth rhetorical method of development is exemplification, using examples to prove a point. And this is actually perhaps another closely related one to narration, because narration often works in an exemplary way. So the idea is that by providing examples, by offering instances in which a particular premise has been true, by offering sort of comparative precedents, things like this, we can start to persuade our audience that the thing that we're trying to get them to believe is accurate. So that's 6. 7 is cause and effect analysis. And this is somewhat similar to comparison and contrast in that you're looking at a multi-part process here. So with cause and effect, what you're trying to do is establish a teleological relationship. That is, this has been a cause of this effect. Because this thing happened, here was the result. We started with the passage of this particular law, and this has been the effect. Crime rates have gone down, for instance, or we changed our policy, we raised our prices by $1, and now we're making substantially more profit, whatever it is. See, what you're doing with cause and effect is trying to draw a linear thread between a particular thing that happens and then the results of it, or the other direction, saying, here's the situation we're in now, we're in the effect of something, well, what's the cause of it? How did we get to the place that we are? What set of circumstances, decisions, whatever it was, led to our current conundrum, our current predicament? So cause and effect is fairly closely connected in a way with process analysis, because process analysis is also concerned with teleological relationships. But whereas cause and effect analysis is looking at the question of how we got to a particular place or how we get to a particular place, process analysis is much more sort of granular. So instruction manuals are process analysis documents. You buy a piece of furniture, flat pack furniture from IKEA, and you have to put it together, and they say get your Allen wrench and put together parts A and Q and use screw 7 to stick it all together. That's all process analysis. So the idea with process analysis is, what are the set of steps, the set of concrete steps that you go through to get to the thing that you want to get to? Or again, like cause and effect, you can reverse this as well. You can say, here's where we are, what are the things that we did to get here? And again, that becomes a sort of tool or technique for, in the future, saying, if we want to get back to this state of affairs, here's the set of instructions we follow. And then our last rhetorical method of development, and this is kind of overarching one that more or less incorporates all of the others. Our last rhetorical method of development is argumentation. And argumentation is a sort of basic definition is the use of evidence to support a particular claim. Now, what's kind of tricky about that is that all of these rhetorical methods of development are types of argumentation, ways that we can present evidence to support a particular claim. But what makes argumentation unique is that whereas all of these other rhetorical methods of development are ways of organizing evidence, ways of organizing data to support a particular point, argumentation is concerned with the links between the evidence that's being provided and the claim itself, the main claim itself. So the idea here being that argumentation is about the steps that we take to move from the data or the types of explanations provided by the other rhetorical methods of development and connect those to our claim. These examples prove the argument because, or this definition proves the argument because, this narration proves the argument because, whatever it is. So that because element is where we get argumentation. That this is the reason why the evidence that you've been given is persuasive. That's what argumentation is about. So again, these are the 9 rhetorical methods of development. Ways of organizing information within an argument in order to be persuasive. Thanks for watching.